Regular session, mayor and city council meeting, 6 p.m. Wednesday, March 5th, 2014. I call this meeting to order. Please rise for the pledge of allegiance and remain standing for invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Invocation will be read by Chief Derek Carnson, and we will also have a moment of silence for fallen police officers.
Thank you. Our eternal Father in heaven, we come before Thee with humbled hearts, grateful for this beautiful day that allows us to meet together publicly in this forum for these elected officials. We pray Thy Spirit to be in attendance, Father, as we discuss the business of our city, of our community. We're grateful for the freedoms that we enjoy, to be able to assemble, to be free, and to be able to discuss those things that are of benefit to this community that we so love and enjoy. Father, our hearts are saddened at this time as we understand the passing of a guardian of the city of Phoenix, Detective John Hobbs, who leaves behind a wife and 3 beautiful daughters, serving mankind. Grateful, Father, for police officers, firemen, those that respond to provide public safety within our community, within our country. We're also grateful for the freedoms that we enjoy on the backs and prices paid by our soldiers who continue to fight for our freedoms. Be with them and their families as well. Bless us all to do our part as members of this community, that none of us are more important than anyone else, that we all have a part in making our community a better place, a place to enjoy as we live our lives. Be with us, Father, for the remainder of this day, and grateful for our Savior Jesus Christ and for what He is, what He means to us, His sacrifice. We leave these things with you in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Chief. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Item number 4, call to the public. Is there anybody in call to the public?
I don't have a phone.
During this time, I will be reading a proclamation. I want to thank Santa Cruz County School Superintendent Alfredo Velasquez for all the work that his office has done for our community, especially in the area of reading. And the proclamation is Read On Santa Cruz County Week, March 3rd to March 7th. I will read the proclamation. Whereas the citizens of Nogales, Arizona stand firmly committed to promoting reading as a catalyst for our students' future academic success, their preparation for careers of the future, and their ability to compete in a global economy. And whereas Santa Cruz County School Superintendent's Office has provided significant leadership in this area of the community involvement in the education of our youth, grounded in the principle that an investment in early literacy is key to the community's well-being and long-term quality of life. And whereas Read On Santa Cruz County and Early Literacy Collaborative will focus on increasing grade level proficiency, promoting reading as a critical pillar in the education of our community students. Now therefore, I, Arturo Garino, calls on the citizens of Nogales, Arizona to assure that every child is in a safe place reading together with a caring adult the week of March 3rd to March 7th, 2014. In witness whereof, we have hereunto set my hand and cause to be affixed the great seal of the city of Nogales, Santa Cruz County, Mayor Arturo Galindo. Thank you very much. Alfredo, thank you very much for your work, sir, for your office.
I want to thank my Ralph Lopez, our Chief Deputy. for
Chief Deputy too.
taking the-
Thank you very much. Okay, item number 5 is communications, public hearing. We're gonna go into public hearing, extension of the alternative expenditure limitation, home rule option. Mr. Dilly, you wanna mention something in regards to this?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, appreciate this. This is on the agenda for a public hearing. I suppose it makes sense just to give, by way of a quick introduction, what home rule is all about, the expenditure limitation, and then allow you to go through that home rule or that public hearing process to gather any public input that might come your way. Every 4 years, as a home rule community, which most communities in the state of Arizona are, we have to put a ballot measure in front of our voters to determine whether or not home rule will continue to be our mode of operation, or if we will allow the state to come in and take reign on our financial matters, is essentially what it is. In the primary election, we will have, we're proposing as staff anyway to do it in the primary election, a ballot measure putting that very question in front of the council. For those of you who have been through this process, this will be old news, but for those who haven't, back in the late 70s, I believe it was, or the early 80s, this home rule option came before the state legislature, and essentially what it does is this. Up until that point, the state used a formula to derive what your expenditure limitation as a local community was. It wasn't determined by the city council. Those elected to, to set direction and policy for the city and vision. It was in the hands of the state through this formula. And this formula was, there was a base budget, and then allowed, from that base budget, allowed population and inflation to factor in that would derive what your annual operating budget was going to be as a city. So let's just say we were under the state rule on that. If they determined through this formula that your budget was $1 million, but you actually received $2 million, you would not be able to spend or utilize that extra $1 million to benefit your community in any way, because it would exceed your expenditure limitation for the year. And so it makes a lot of sense, which is why the legislation came into play to create this option for home rule. Now, it's not something that we can decide, it's not something the council can decide, it's not something staff can even recommend in terms of just moving forward with. In other words, it's not a decision that the council can make as the legislative body for the city. It requires the voters to put that into place every 4 years. So simply put, and these are really rough numbers. They're just estimates at this point in time. But if we were under the state rule and not home rule, we would have to reduce our operating budget we'd have to reduce our operating budget about 16%. Okay, is that the right percentage?
16 million.
60 million, 20%, 25% roughly?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I had those numbers mixed up. And just to put that into perspective, we would have to cut that out of our budget in terms of an operating expenditure, okay? We have to reduce our total expenditure limitation, that amount, and put that into perspective. 16 million is just shy of what our general fund operating budget is in total, okay? So it's significant, it's substantial, it's very important on a number of different levels for this community. One is that home rule allows you as the elected body for the city to gather information on where you're at financially, what your forecasts are, what you think is gonna be coming in next, the following year. Staff provides that information, and you have, under home rule, the authority to make a decision on what your expenditure limitation is going to be. You're charged, by law, we have to have a balanced budget, right? So, there's already those laws in place. It's not like we can, create a fictitious, well, we're not the federal government, right? We can't just make things happen like that. We have to have a balanced budget by law, okay? So what home rule does is it allows you to utilize every single penny of resources to provide services and benefit to your constituents here in your community under home rule. If you don't have home rule, and I've seen a couple communities where voters maybe just didn't understand what it was all about, but right, wrong, or indifferent, they decided not to renew the home rule, and they fell under the state formula-driven expenditure limitation, and it was a drastic hit to those communities. In every instance that I'm aware of, the elected body immediately focused on trying to have a special session, a special election, to put that back in front of the voters for reconsideration, because of how drastic that impact is on the operating capabilities of your community, and the fact that it strips the elected body of that right and power to have local control over where we go as a community and what we do in providing services through the resources that we have. So that's really the nuts and bolts of it. We've done this 4 years ago in August, and we're up again, and we have to put it in front of the voters. Our job as a city is to put the information out. I know that last time we did this, I and staff, we went out to schools, we did PTA meetings, and got the word out to parents, got the word out to folks. I know I was at the Lions Club and the Rotary Club, just presenting the facts, trying to inform and educate the voter base for the community. And at the end of the day, when this issue came in front of the voters, it was a solid win in favor of home rule, no questions asked. But every time this issue comes up, you're always running the risk of it not passing. This really is an issue that is at the heart and interest of every single one of you on the dais. No one's excluded from it. It's certainly an interest for staff who is, we're the ones behind the shovels, behind the wheels, behind the printers and the computers trying to make services happen for the community. And we realize that if we don't do so under a home rule, then that's going to have a dramatic impact on how we move forward in providing services to this community. So this is very important. It's not something to take lightly, and I think in every social circle that you're a part of, as elected officials, bringing this issue up, talking to the points, putting the facts out, and helping your social network understand the importance of having this happen is absolutely critical to the success of us seeing home rule continue in this community. I'd be happy to answer any questions before you go into your public hearing, but I think that's the nuts and bolts of it.
I just have one, out of curiosity here, question. On these communities that you're talking about, that they took drastic hits, and say they had like 40 million and the people voted against it, and they were, say the formula just to say came under 30 million, and they couldn't handle their overall expense because they were cut 10 million.
Sure.
So they take a hit. What happens to that 10 million that's riding around it?
Yeah,
Put it away
it's a
for a
great
rainy day
question.
or what?
Yeah, great question. It came up quite a bit 4 years ago when we were talking to the community members. No, the state doesn't garnish it. They don't, they don't take and seize it. They, it remains the asset of the city, but your ability to use it is handicapped by the formula that is put forward by the state.
It's like frozen?
It's there, it's in your account, but it's not like you can go out and use it. So that's why home rule is so important. It allows you as the elected body, the governing body for this community, make those decisions and how you want to utilize your assets and your resources in providing services to the community.
And if you go over the expenditure limitation, you get fined.
Yeah,
You have to know that.
big time, you can't, I mean, there's all sorts of consequences for doing that, and we live with those consequences even today. When you go through this budget process, you adopt a tentative budget which establishes the expenditure limitation for the city, okay? We're bound, that's like that's a hard line for us, we don't go beyond that. Now, we can move budget stuff around within that expenditure limitation, but we can't exceed that expenditure limitation. With or without home rule.
You can go down.
Yeah, yeah. You can go down, you can shift, but you can't go over. Okay? Any other questions? Happy to answer. This is really important, something you guys need to be talking about how important this is between now and August when this issue comes before them at the polls.
We open it for public hearing.
Yes, sir.
So at this moment, it's open for public hearing. Anybody that would like to discuss this or need any more information in regards to home rule?
I have a small question.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
to the dais, please. I mean, to the podium. State your name and your address for the record.
My name is Kirk Prendergast, live 472 West Walnut Street, Nogales. I was just curious about why do the primary election and not the November election?
We have the option, and we know that there's a packed ballot on the November election, and we don't want this issue to be confused with any other issue. We want the voters to definitely know what they're voting on and how they're voting on it and why they're voting on it, and not get confused with anything else on the ballot. So because we have the option, we decided we would go for the primary election.
And if it doesn't pass in the primary election, you decide to hold a special election, when would it be, when do you think that special election would happen?
Probably next year.
I think we'll have to look at the law on that. It's so if it doesn't pass, we live with it for 2 years.
2 years, is it?
2 years. Okay. The other question, Mr. Mayor,
Yes,
the
go ahead.
other common question is, well, if I say yes to this, does this mean additional taxes? Does this mean additional fees, whatever? The answer is no. The real question is how you want your local government to operate. Do you want it to operate under an expenditure limitation set forth by the powers up at 300 West Jefferson in Phoenix? Or do you want the power to decide to be here local in the hands of the elected body that you put into place? So that's really the question of home rule. So whatever taxes are in place, whatever fees are in place, that doesn't change. It all stays the way it is, regardless of home rule or not home rule. It's just on the expenditure side, what can the city council do as a governing body and what they can't do with the resources that they have available to them.
And if it doesn't pass, what is going to get cut? Have you guys given
It's a good question. That's something that we'd have to discuss that and decide when we get to that bridge. I'm hoping that we don't have to. That type of discussion is going to be very difficult to have, and no doubt, we're not talking about fuel at that point. We're not talking about tires. We're not talking about computers or maintenance of parks. We're talking about getting rid of parks. We're talking about getting rid of people. We're talking about affecting, maybe even depending on the circumstance, public safety. I mean, it's a big deal. It really is. It's big.
And again, if it doesn't pass, does it take effect immediately? Do you have to cut that, or is it the fiscal year you can spend what you?
It's the following fiscal year. So if it doesn't pass in August, then come July 15, that's when that would take effect.
Thank you.
Go ahead, I have one final question. Just out of curiosity on that formula, does it change from each cycle or how do they come about it, the state?
Back when they set it in place, they came up with a base budget. Every city has it. They have it on record what your base budget is, 1981, or I don't know when that year was, but they determined a base budget. And then every year since then, they use a factor of population and inflation to determine what your expenditure limitation will be. So it does change year in, year out, because populations change based off of censuses and mid-decade censuses, and inflation, the price consumer index changes from year to year. So that does change, but it doesn't take a whole lot of math to figure out how detrimental it would be to us if we were limited to the budget proposed by this formula.
It would seem that states doing that, given the state rule on that, you know, why would they come up with that? I mean, putting the communities and the rural communities especially in that position.
Can I comment?
Yes, go ahead.
Well, initially, it was an effort to curtail rising property taxes. So it doesn't hurt your question, it doesn't affect a community like ours that doesn't have a property tax. We're just stuck with a lot of money we can't use or anything. In a community that had a property tax, they had all that surplus money, then they could use that and not have to raise their assessments, and that would affect that. But the unfairness of all that was the initial setting of the limits. It was based on population and other factors.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of problems in arriving at those population figures. In Santa Cruz County, Mr. Parada was on the board, and then when it was being established by the city, one of the objections that the county and the city had at that time was that the formula only addressed the 20,000 base population, 30 with the county, and it did not take into account all the people that come across on a daily basis. So the limitation was being established for a small population, not taking into account what we have on a daily basis. And that was the unfairness of it. It was artificially low. And that's why the home rule came out. Santa Cruz County did it a little bit different. I think Mr. Parada and the other people went up, they got an amendment or an adjustment because of that issue and so on. But it's a real unfair formula, and it'll affect a lot of communities.
Well, I guess anybody want to speak in reference to the public hearing? Okay, we'll go back, we'll go to discussion items. Item number 6, number 1, 2013-2014 interim performance assessment and FY 2014-2015 budget update. Mr. Dillon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. It's that time of year. At this point, we have the benefit of the months of November, December, and January by way of revenue receipts for the city. When we get to that point, we know it's time and appropriate to put forward some kind of mid-year budget type discussion and presentation. That's in fact what's being passed out to you tonight. I'd like to turn the time over to Mr. White to go through this presentation with you. I might pipe in from time to time, and then maybe at the end we can have a little discussion about what it all means and where we're going.
Right.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead, Aaron.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. So we put this together here for your information. So we'll just start right in to it. So the purpose of today's presentation is to give the City Council, interested public, mid-year update of the city's financial condition in the middle of, well, more or less, middle of the fiscal year, and also where we are with the budget process for the upcoming fiscal year 14-15. No action is required tonight, but obviously direction will always be received. So first of all, we're going to start with the mid-year update, and then after that we'll go into the next year's budget update. So we'll start first with slide 4 here. So where are we after the holiday sales? I think everybody is curious, right? How are we doing? How were the holiday sales this year. Revenues are on target right now with projected budget, and the departments have been able to maintain expenditures below revenues. So we're keeping that cushion so far through the year. You'll see that revenues have grown 3.58% overall over last year, year to date. And the real encouraging sign here is that retail sales have grown more than 5% year to date. With one caveat, of course, the slim months are ahead, right? So we had our big months, and now, as generally speaking, spending falls back down to kind of normal levels over the next couple of months as we end up.
Another holiday?
There you go, proclamation to create a new holiday. So even though it looks like we're doing pretty well, these are still mid-year numbers. We haven't felt yet the full impact of the pay increase or the slim months ahead, and how that will ultimately affect the end of the year. So we'll continue to track revenues and expenditures. We provide a monthly report to you on a monthly basis. And so for now, we're still advising department directors to continue to have constraints in place on discretionary spending to make sure we still maintain expenditures under revenues. So far, departments have done very well with that. So moving forward, then I just wanted to show you a 7-year history of where we are with revenues. Please remember, all of these slides are year to date, right? So this is all revenues received through the end of January, which captures all of the sales through the holiday season. So you'll see our best years were 7 and 6 years ago, fiscal years 7-8 and fiscal years 8-9. Where at this point in the year, the city had taken in $12.3 million in revenues. This year, you can see we're starting to kind of trend up. It looks like fiscal year 12 and 13 may have been kind of the bottom of that. So we're starting to move up, but still not at the levels where we were 6 or 7 years ago. And you'll see here also the biggest change is in the state shared revenues. So obviously those numbers are just given to us on an annual basis, right? And those revenues come in. There's nothing that we can do to impact those numbers. One of the good things, even though local sales tax, the blue portion, is down, it's not nearly as far down as were the state shared revenue. So that's a great sign, I think, for this community, that it, even though it had an impact, the economic downturn had an impact, maybe not as much as other communities did. As we move, I apologize, please, if you have any questions or anything as we move forward, feel free to
Thank you, Aaron.
interrupt. So as we move forward then, to look more specifically at where we are this year compared to last year. So your blue line is the budget. The green lines are revenues, and the red are expenditures. The one on the far right are last year's revenues and expenditures, and the one with a bolder color are this year's revenues and expenditures. So you can see that revenues are basically right at projected budgets, and expenditures are still below revenues, slightly up from last year, largely in part to retirement contributions, health insurance premium increases, and some initiatives that were specifically called out during the last budget process. Generally speaking, at this time in the year, you would want to see that green bar to be a little higher than budget projections to get us through the rest of the year, right? So even though it looks good, there is a little bit of a question mark to that we need to take into consideration.
So, Aaron, just to restate, that's a good picture of the budget versus the blue versus the green, budget versus actual revenue. But what that reflects is the best of our year.
Correct.
right? The holiday season is really the time that we look to kind of carry us to the end of the year. So what Aaron is saying is, we would ideally like to see that green line much higher than the blue, so that we know that by the time we get to the end of June, you know, it's gonna kind of balance itself out. Okay, so.
Yeah, but comparing to the other past two years, that's a good indicator that where we're at right now. We're hoping
is.
that it gets better.
Yeah, right. We're always hoping that it gets better, but it is a good indicator. And one thing that I did notice, and it doesn't, I don't call it out in the presentation, but as we were analyzing these monthly sales tax information coming in, we noticed that overall, month to month, it appears that spending is stronger, which would indicate to me greater consumer confidence, greater ability to spend on a regular basis. So I think that's a real good sign for us. I don't know if that's this side of the border, the other side of the border, combination of both, right? We don't have that type of detail, but from a high level, it appears that things do have a positive outlook.
It's interesting, as we've looked at these numbers, it's true that month to month, it seems like our revenue generation is stronger in comparison to the last couple of years. So that consumer confidence is there. What's interesting though is that our holiday period seems to have lagged just a little bit in comparison to past years. It wasn't quite as strong as it has been in the past. But month to month, it's stronger than it has been in the past. So it's been very interesting to watch this.
You know, visually, when you saw the people downtown during the holidays,
Surprised me, yeah.
It's, you know, when I remember you and I were talking about this, and you also are in it, and saying that comparing to the past years, it was basically even. But you saw these people downtown, you know, the streets were full, and all these vehicles from Sinaloa and Sonora, and I mean, in the downtown area. You would think that it was going to be a little bit better than last year, but
Yeah.
it's almost even. It's
Yeah,
unbelievable.
on the holiday season,
Yeah.
it's very surprising. So I don't know if there were more people, they just bought less individually. I don't know. Could be a number of different reasons, but that's what's tracking.
Yes.
Right now, you have the Lent period right now, and you'll have a lot of people coming on vacations, they're using that time to come to the border. So that's gonna be a big plus.
It should.
We get a good week. Huh?
Yeah.
And
Vice Mayor, did you have something?
No.
No? Okay.
And honestly, I don't know if we've had enough time to really track the impact of policy decisions made on the Mexico side of the border,
Yeah.
right? So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
That might take a year.
It might.
Might take a year, but I think it will be, it will help communities along the border. Easy. Go ahead, Aaron.
So, thank you very much. So, I think the story here, though, is that overall, the revenues are better than last year. So it's a good trend for us. As we move forward, then this is a detailed. It's a lot of information onto one graph, but it captures our enterprise funds and the HERF fund. So you will see in all of the funds, expenditures remain less than revenues, which is a very good trend. That means we're staying financially responsible there in those funds. Revenues, for the most part, are under budget, except for a few, specifically in the water fund. So that one has done very well. So any questions, specific questions about the enterprise funds or the HERF fund?
Yes, go ahead.
Basically shows that so far for the year, all the enterprise funds are in the black.
Correct. Yeah, and if I may, there with the sewer fund, in fact, we just got the invoice today for the IBWC payment, so we will be seeing that hit, as well as 2 more IBWC payments. Those are the real big ticket items for the sewer fund. So we haven't really seen the impact of that in the sewer fund yet.
Aaron?
Yeah, it all depends if Mr. Machado gets to work, huh?
On what?
IBWC.
Oh, yeah, well, we got that.
We're on the right track on that one, though. Yes, Mr. Dilly, go ahead.
Aaron, you made mention of you know, a recent quarterly payment for IBWC and the fact that we've got two more. Looking at expenditure comparisons, we're already higher this year than we were in the previous year.
Yeah, so in the sewer fund this year, they've had a few major repairs that are driving the expenditures up this year over last year. 2 lift stations needed new pumps, and a few other operating and maintenance costs that weren't incurred in the previous year. So that's where you see the expenditure increase there. As well, there's one you'll see in sanitation, very minimal, but increased maintenance cost of vehicles is what's driving that expenditure.
On those trucks?
Yes. Thank you. Then I did want to talk about then the overweight fees summary. So the red was last fiscal year's revenues by month, and the blue is current fiscal year's revenues by month. Last fiscal year, you'll see that there are no red lines indicating revenues for July and August because the law's implementation didn't take place until September, which is when we started receiving the first revenues. So year to date, this year we have received $269,000 in overweight fees, as compared to previous fiscal year was $149,000. This year's budget contemplates $900,000 in revenues for overweight fees. The way we're tracking and looking at last year's histories, the largest revenues were received for in the months of May and June. And if things continue like they did last year, we'll probably be on track, if not at the budget, pretty close to it. So I think it's a good sign there. Of course, anything can happen with weather and produce. South of us, it's still hard to tell.
I just wanted to point out to the council, if you're looking at slide number 8 or page number 8 of your presentation, the numbers are reversed right here.
Oh, I apologize, you're right.
So just make sure you're flipping those totals down there so you're not confused on what year is tied to which.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So that's where we are. Basically, mid-year report. If there are no other questions for the mid-year report, we'll jump into coming fiscal year budget update.
Any questions about mid-year? How we're doing right now?
It's very good. Go ahead.
Okay. Mayor Troy. So we have the budget team together with management has put together a kind of a first blush budget for general fund and the enterprise funds and the HERF fund. And before we get into what the effect is of that, just wanted to call out a few assumptions. We are projecting a slight increase in sales tax revenues over projected year-end revenues this year. We have not received state shared revenue projections yet from the league. We assume those numbers will increase. We're hoping that we'll get those numbers by the end of next week. And that will put us, give us a better idea of where we will be for next year's budget. In the budget is contemplated a 5% health insurance premium increase. And for purposes of tonight, that increase, the premium increase has been split 50-50 between employees and the city. The $500 holiday bonus, which had been budgeted in past fiscal years, has been removed from the budget. Workman's comp and general insurance premiums have been slightly increased. As well, we have received estimated refund savings, bond refund savings, and that has been built in across all funds. And we are not assuming currently any new revenues from the proposed annexation. And so those are the main assumptions built into the budget currently.
Are there any questions about those assumptions?
So moving forward, then we say, all right, so where are we? So the general fund, looks like right now about a $725,000 shortfall of expenditures over revenues. HERF, sewer, and water funds are projected to be balanced this year, or sorry, coming fiscal year. And sanitation is projecting more than a $200,000 shortfall of expenditures over revenues. Obviously, we're still at a preliminary stage. Going back to the assumptions, we haven't received the state shared revenue numbers yet, which will play into this. The sanitation number, unfortunately, is that one kind of is what it is currently, but we're not expecting to receive any revised revenue projections on that one.
In other words, state shared revenues doesn't impact that fund
No,
at all.
it does
Not
not.
sanitation.
It does not.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Vice Mayor.
But the state revenue shared funds, none of them are being shown. That's why we have that 725,000
Now,
shortfall.
what we're not showing is, basically what we did was we took the state shared revenue allocation that we got this year, and we just brought that same amount over. We expect that state shared revenues are probably gonna be tracking higher, so that number will go up, but we don't know how much until we get those numbers from the League of Arizona Cities, which should happen probably within the next couple of weeks. So right now, it's just basically, we're assuming that it's the same amount that we got this year is tracking in our budget today, in our proposed budget today.
On the general funding at 725,000, that's actual shortfall, or is that what's budgeted, figuring what's budgeted?
This is looking at next year's budget. And right now, that's the difference between projected revenues and projected expenditures.
And on sanitation, the shortfall there in sanitation, have we figured out what it's basically due to? I mean, are we losing a lot of customers from the commercial end, or where are we falling behind on sanitation?
Aaron?
Yeah, if I may.
Yes,
Mr. Mayor.
I think that we've been in sanitation for the longest time. That's the only enterprise fund that hasn't been doing well.
The sewer was really struggling, but because of the rate adjustments that the council approved 4 years ago, we've got one more adjustment that will happen next February. And then that will conclude that. But because of those, it seems to has brought the sewer fund out of the red water and into the black, which is what we needed to have happen. We did not at the time address sanitation fees, but this year is the first year that we're tracking a significant deficit. The other years was either right in the black or just right under the the line, and we could manage that. This one is clearly an issue that we're going to have to address. As far as the factors that are playing into that deficit, Mayor, if we can have Aaron try to address those.
The state didn't help by taking a lot of our.
No, they didn't. And in fact, we haven't lost any accounts in the recent history, in the last year or so. It was kind of a one-time hit for a couple of months, and then after that, it's settled off quite a bit. But we are projecting $82,000 less in revenue, as well as almost $120,000 in increased personnel costs in that fund. So that's basically where we get that other expenditures, operating expenditures are assumed even year to year.
Anything promotional that we could do to see if we could get some of those accounts back to that waste management of the other companies took from us, thanks to the state of Arizona?
Yeah, if obviously, we would love your support in speaking to those companies, right, who have gone to another provider. Internally, as staff, we have, in, I think it was December, I sent a personal letter to each account that we have lost, telling them the impact of local revenues or local expenditures being spent in the community and the impact that has. Unfortunately, we didn't receive any feedback from them.
It's kind of a bottom line thing.
Is there a big difference between our competitors and our service?
Well, here really is the monster that we face. First off, our competitor is, our main competitor, which is Waste Management. It's a national, big, deep-pocketed organization who understands the game of competition. And they're in a position to, lowball a customer, get them on board, and then work with that customer down the road, right? Our policies are set in place. We've got, ordinances that dictate what our prices are gonna be. You want this can, well, it's gonna be this much. You want this can, it's gonna be this much. So that's playing a factor. We're less responsive as government, as a government form, we're less responsive than would be the private sector in terms of that type of competition. The other thing that's at play is that they are operating lean and mean. When they're running their trucks, they're running one person on that truck. And when you just take a cross section of any of our funds, doesn't matter if it's general fund or HERF or enterprise funds, a big portion of our costs is tied up in personnel. Same with school districts, same with the county, and that's just the nature of the beast that we face. So one way we can try to deal with this is to do a dual approach. We can look at policy changes that would affect programs and how we operate and provide that service. That'll take policy. That'll take you guys getting ahead of this thing and saying, okay, what makes sense? What can we do? The other thing is on the operations side. We might need to be looking at a different mode of operation where we're trying to convert. We've made a decision to go side load trucks for residential, right? Well, we might need to look down the road if we want to protect our commercial routes, which actually is a huge part of our revenue base for the sanitation department. We might want to consider moving into a front load type scenario, where we only have one person on that truck.
Or one size container.
No, we'll probably have to do multi-size containers, but those front load trucks can do all different sizes of containers. So, we're probably gonna have to take a multi-pronged approach and have those types of discussions. We quite frankly, provide services that if you were to live in Tucson, if you were to live in any other place, Marana or Sierra Vista or any place in Phoenix, we provide services that other communities charge for, and we don't, and that's just wrapped into our $15 a month fee. So, waste management, allied waste, some of those types of providers understand this game and they figure out how to compete by streamlining and finding these ways to do it. So we just have to play the game the same way, and if we want to protect those programs.
And the thing about it too is that they go for the big ticket ones.
Of course.
And they have contracts, not a 1 year, they can go up to 5 years. So when you make a contract with them, you're there with 5 years. And
Has Waste Management gone down and taken any of our downtown merchant
No.
accounts?
Wow.
No.
Slim pick.
No.
Why?
Why?
They're gonna go to the Walmarts, they're gonna go to the big ones.
And many of the customers that have signed contracts with Waste Management, they also do have national contracts with Waste Management. So let's
Yeah.
say Safeway, every Safeway in Arizona has a contract where possible with Waste Management. So that's another beast that we're fighting with.
Because when we
It's hard to
approach them,
compete with them.
a lot of the responses are, well, we don't make that decision, corporate makes that decision. And what we're finding is it's corporate Waste Management talking to corporate Safeway or corporate
In
Walmart
Chicago to
or,
St. Louis.
and it's happening over there on the East Coast. It's not even happening here. They don't know faces, they don't know communities, they don't know names, and they're just making a decision that at the end of the day makes the most sense on the bottom line. So.
Go ahead, Mr.
Mr. Dilly, also, when we signed the contract with Tucson Recycling, there was a clause in there when they went to their new dump, that the rates would go down.
Yeah.
Have they gone to their new dump yet, or are we still, that's still pending, or?
I don't think they've made the move to the new dump, but go ahead, Aaron.
So, I think it was effective December?
Yeah.
December, they started transporting to Sahuarita, which has reduced costs. The fuel surcharge.
Is that their new, that's not their new dump in Sarita?
They have taken over operations of Pima County landfills.
Are they still moving on their landfill
Marana?
option in Marana?
They're already out of operation.
Okay, so they have that option, so those reduced rates are in effect?
And not to mention, over a year ago, we did negotiate a contract that gave us a more favorable price that was approved by the city council. And so we are seeing the benefit there.
It dropped like $5 or something like that.
Yeah, more or less, about 4 to 5.
I think if it weren't for that, I mean, we would be talking some pretty daunting numbers, honestly, with our sanitation, but we have benefited from those negotiations and those reduced rates.
On the December, when they dropped the price in December,
They dropped the fuel surcharge price.
they dropped the fuel surcharge, but they also were gonna reduce our dumping fees. Has that taken effect, or do we need to debate it or discuss it, or?
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Go ahead.
That was part of the renegotiated contract over a year ago. They realized that they weren't going to make their timelines, and so they gave us the reduced price at that time.
Yeah, I remember Mr. Massey talking to me about that.
But was it the total amount, or there was still an amount to come later? As far as I know, there was an amount that they still said that they were gonna go ahead and reduce it once they got the operation going in Marana.
Mr. Mayor, if I may. So essentially, the renegotiated contract eliminated those clauses in the contract and just said, look, we didn't make our timelines, we're gonna give you the rebate now. And that's how we were able to benefit with the reduced prices.
That was the tonnage rebate, and now we're seeing a fuel surcharge discount because they're not traveling so far.
Is there any other negotiations in the near future to reduce it even lower, or is it gonna be a cap?
Yeah, I as of now, negotiations have not been engaged with them. The contract, if I'm not mistaken, was up through 2017. Are you familiar? Mr. Machado? Yeah. There is an increase. I think it's a 2.5% increase in the tipping fee annually. Takes effect every July. So that is factored into the budget currently.
One thing we might think about talking, regarding this item when we get to it down the road. If we have a contract with our provider that says there's an escalation clause in there where its tipping fees and charges to us are gonna go up 2% every year, we might want to do something like that with our own rates, because otherwise we're making the problem down the road much more difficult if we're not adjusting our rates that we're charging residents and just absorbing what we're getting hit by the provider. So we might want to, be thinking about that and how we wrestle with that particular issue.
Mr. Mayor?
Go ahead.
Also, the contract, the negotiated contract, was it like 25% less than the previous contract that was signed 5 years before that?
I can't speak to that point. And also, Joe, I hope we're not getting off topic here. Okay. But I can't speak to that. I don't know the
I
term.
remember there was a huge difference when we renegotiated the contract, which was, if we hadn't done that, and I think it was like a 25% reduction of the previous contract.
Well, maybe what we need to do is, it looks like we need some more information to this, and maybe when we come back, down the line on our budget process, you can get some information on that, or see what we have, if we're coming with the company, and see address the vice mayor's questions on that, and see if we can do it.
And Mr. Mayor, if I may,
Go ahead.
one thing protecting our current customer base, commercial customer base, is our contract with Tucson Recycling. Built into that contract is a non-compete clause that they will not accept waste from other carriers, providing the same type of service that we provide. provide. Right, so the big green truck that you see picking up at a few customers around town, they're not using our transfer station. So, so they have to go elsewhere. And we held the line pretty hard, pretty firm 2 years ago when Waste Management started coming in, and we said, Tucson, no, you don't do that. And if you don't hold up your part of the bargain, then obviously there'll be repercussions. Right? And so that helped stem the tide quite a bit.
That's good. Okay, continue.
Thank you very much. So moving forward then, just wanted to talk briefly about what are the drivers and the general fund expenditures here. Obviously, the pay raise does have a significant increase. In the general fund, we backed out here costs associated with the enterprise funds. It's more or less about that much. Increased healthcare costs have been explained, about $78,000. ASRS is the retirement system for non-public safety employees. That's about a $25,000 increase. That one was actually pretty small this year, which is a huge benefit. But the public safety retirement system had a significant increase this year. And so that's a $131,000 hit. So estimated general fund increase, just over $1 million. Obviously the projected increased revenues that we have so far of about $300,000 offset that to the current $700,000 shortfall that we have now.
Any questions on that? Those are just the major drivers that we're trying to grapple with.
And you know, kudos to the department directors who held baselines basically on all operating costs, and otherwise the shortfall that we're looking at would have been significantly more. And so then, you know, what actions can we take to address the expenditures over revenues? In the general fund, staff will continue to evaluate core services that the city is providing, as well as explore other options to make up the revenue and expenditure gap. Obviously, you know, internal staff, we're just trying to get our heads wrapped around what this shortfall is, and it will take some time then to identify recommendations as to how we can address that. Specifically, so that's the general fund. Specifically in the sanitation, we've talked a lot about it. With staff to identify opportunities for operational efficiencies, but also policy and program changes for increased revenues and decreased costs. You know, the user fee for sanitation hasn't increased in a very long time, so that's something that may be for consideration. Any other questions with that slide? This slide is a little text heavy, and I apologize, but from our end, we wanted to engage you all as soon as possible in this discussion with the Nogales rides. Currently, this fiscal year 13-14, Nogales rides had a budget of $77,000. That was a full-time driver and a part-time driver, and then operating costs, fuel, insurance, and things like that. And so half of the cost was from general fund subsidy, and then the other half of the cost was anticipated grant revenues. The city did not receive the 5310 funding for that round, and so staff has been able to keep those expenditures as low as possible to keep it under the $38,000 that was budgeted from the general fund. But so right now we only have one driver providing service, so there's only one van driving around, right? And so that has been a conscious effort by staff to try to maintain the service while also maintaining costs under what was budgeted. And then looking forward to next fiscal year 14 and 15, so staff has included the entire $77,000 program budget into the general fund, assuming that the general fund will pick up the entire operating budget with no grant revenues. But we are applying once again for the 5310 monies, and there's an order, apologies, in front of you tonight, speaking to that. But I think there is a very real question that needs to be addressed. What if, what if the grant funding isn't received? Obviously, we're looking at over $700,000 shortfall in the general fund. $77,000 of that is Nogales Rides. And so I think as a city council, there needs to be some type of dialogue or decision directing staff as to what do we do here. Obviously, we'll continue to try to find money where we can, but that pool of money with 5310 is drying up. And it's more and more difficult to get that money.
Aaron, what was the reason why they stopped the 50/50? Was there any reason for that?
Well, Mr. Mayor, if I
Go ahead, Aaron.
Thank you. So the city obviously is contributing its portion, right?
Right.
$50,000. So last week we had a site visit, Nogales Ride site visit by CEGO staff and ADOT staff, and we talked about the contract the application that we submitted last year. They said that it was a very strong application. It's just that ADOT is reprioritizing 5310 monies away from 5310 and into other programs, specifically the 5311 program, which is a fixed route type of program.
And I'll start it with the LTAP money. When we lost LTAP, the state removed LTAP and we weren't able to tap into that opportunity when we had the 3 vans. That hurt every rural community.
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Jones.
Members of the council, so if I can summarize this issue for you. This year, our general fund expenditure is $38,000. We had hoped it would have been up there at $77,000 because we would have been awarded the grant. We weren't given the grant, so we've held our operations to fall within that $38,000 number. Okay. Programmed in the budget, which is adding to the $700,000 deficit, we put back in a full $77,000, not the $38,000 like we're operating today, but a full $77,000. And I think what would be helpful for us is to know what direction you guys want us to go relative to this particular project. We have applied for the grant again, which we will apply. Yeah, and we've been told that our application last year was a very strong one. Okay, so we're going to do it again, and we're going to try to do what we can to even further strengthen the application. But at the end of the day, if we don't get it, is the council okay with us operating the way we're operating today? Would you rather take all of that money and put it somewhere else? Those types of decisions, those types of information is what we need as staff. Because if we don't have to program 77, then we've just found $38,000 we can help put towards the cause, right? If you understand the situation, you're saying, hey, what we're doing today is better than nothing, keep that going, then we can at least reduce it to that 38,000. And if we get that ADOT grant, we can pull from our our excess budget authority and make sure that we can beef up that program to utilize those monies. So we just kind of need that input. I don't know what kind of ridership we have on it. I know it serves people. I know people benefit from it. I don't know how many people benefit from it. Not today, I don't. And whether or not you feel like that's a material benefit that we need to be continually putting that money out, we can provide that information for you at a later date. But those are the types of discussions that we have to have about this.
In the administrative level at CEGO, has anything come through in reference to this?
At the last CEGO meeting I attended, chairing the administrative council, we talked about this, and the fact is that 5310 monies are going the same way as the dodo bird, right? I mean, they're out, and they are focusing on that 5311, which is the fixed route type program. Obviously, we can throw our name in the hat for those types of programs, but they're really expensive.
Oh yeah.
They're very, very expensive. But I think that ADOT has made a decision, at some level in the organization, that seems to serve more people than this type of program that we're operating today. And obviously, ADOT, much like you guys have to make decisions on how do we take that $1 that we have to benefit the most number of people. And they've probably found that to be the 5311 program and not this 5310 program.
Go ahead.
So what kind of scheduling is involved in that, in order to meet the needs of the people out there? Does that cover the whole town then, is that, or is it just specific areas that?
It covers the town, it's, John, do you know that, or? I know it's a call-in and it's a
call-in.
schedule and there's restricted hours, but.
Yeah,
Call in and then pick up certain people and take them to the pharmacy, the doctor, and the groceries and stuff like that. So
exactly.
you have to call in and schedule.
And it's not
a few
call
days
in.
advance.
Right.
They'll pick you up,
2 days.
take you in the store, and then from there they'll go pick you up again and take you home.
I know that we try to be as accommodating as possible. You know, we want to, if we're gonna go somewhere, we want to be able to benefit them, as many people as we can. Which is why we encourage people, if they can schedule their doctor's, appointment in advance, maybe plan to hit the pharmacy at the same time and then call in and get a ride. We struggle when it's the, hey, I know I didn't call in, but I have a doctor's appointment in 10 minutes kind of thing. That doesn't work very well, right? So, it's a struggle, and then there again, I know that the program by design, isn't meant to really address the masses. That's your fixed route type, type program. It's a little more restricted.
Would it cover, say, a few ladies that lives in a certain section, and there's 4 of them that wanna go shopping today, like Walmart, they don't have a ride, they all get together and call in a couple of days ahead, they'll pick them up.
And the problem is that every time you see the van, it seems like there's only one person in it or 2 people in it. But it's because they drop people off at certain places, and then when they drop them off, they'll go pick up others scheduled within about half an hour, and they'll take them somewhere else, and then he'll hurry to pick up the other ones that are doing. But you'll never see the capacity of 15 people in the van. You'll never see that, because they don't, like Mr. Dilly was saying, if that could happen, it would probably be a little bit more efficient, but it'd be, for that type of need, it's hard to say, you know what, we're gonna take everybody and then we'll drop them in line. And not all of them go to the doctor at the same time, not all of them go to the pharmacy at the same time, so. And then some of them now, we've even gotten to the point that we've been taking them to the senior center, because they don't even have a driver at the senior center right now. The gentleman is sick and the van is idle. And so we've been taking the people to the senior center to go eat and spend the time there. So it's a good project. It's just that Mr. Dilly said it's the dodo bird. I don't know if you guys know what a dodo bird is. There's a couple of them in Nogales, but
Mr. Mayor, if I may. As well, just to keep this in perspective, these 5310 monies come with a lot of strings attached. There are a lot of administrative responsibilities and costs. I know prior to the site visit last week, Juan and I probably spent, what, Juan? Probably
2 or 3 hours?
Well, you spent 2 or 3 hours. I spent quite a bit more. It was a substantial amount of administrative time getting ready for the site visit. And it's really, it takes quite a bit of time for the reporting and all of that. So there are strings attached to this money.
you know, at one time we had 3 drivers and a coordinator. Remember?
And that was back in the 5310 heyday.
Yes,
There
and
was a lot
then we
of money.
went down to just 1 driver right now, and the person in the office in Public Works is the one that's receiving the calls. The coordinator used to be scheduling everything, so it's been reduced tremendously. Yes, Vice Mayor.
You know, does Mariposa Clinic, do they still have a bus that picks up and, did they still do it?
I don't know.
Please still have
No, I mean, you know, a while back, the idea was partnering up with the different people that had, you know, I remember at that time Mariposa did it.
Santa Cruz Training has one.
Santa Cruz Training had it and all that, and maybe everybody could group together to have one central location, and that would be using the buses more.
For those needs.
For those needs, right?
Good idea to explore that.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, that is the job of the mobility coordinator, which the funding for that position has gone away. Hence, the position is gone, and hence the coordination has, is just not there like it used to be.
Go ahead, continue, Mr. Dilly or Aaron.
So probably what we're looking for maybe here are some head nods. If we want to continue with the $77,000 that we have, or maintain what we're doing this year at 40.
Maybe we can just say, okay, let's put the 38,000, protect what we've got going. If we get the grant, then we'll respond favorably. If we don't, at least we've protected what we have.
That's the best.
Yeah.
Okay. So that'll help that deficit, a little bit. So I appreciate that input. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then to conclude then, obviously this is a time and opportunity for the city council to direct staff as to any policy changes that may be coming. So that way we can begin to program those in the budget. So we're all ears.
And don't jump in.
I still think that there's a way to tag the railroads. I know there's gotta be an opening for it. I think we had to research real close, so we can tag them, or privilege tag or whatever. But I'm pretty sure we can do it. I don't know that we have any,
But to do what, to tax them, or?
yeah, some kind of a tax, privilege tax. Railway costs $1 at least.
They're gonna charge us for using the right of way, that's what's gonna happen. I don't know, like, is there a possibility that could be done?
I think any idea has to be considered, right? In order for us to get through these types of times. I can tell you that I've never seen that when it comes to the railroad. It's God, it's the railroad, and then it's President Obama, right?
It's time to bring him down.
And it's what's that?
It's time to bring him down.
Well,
And in the state is DPS, everybody else.
well, so we know how I'm still suffering from post-traumatic syndrome with the railroad. My latest experience with them was when I was up in Queen Creek. We did an improvement district that required a major arterial road to be constructed underneath the railroad. It wasn't even over, right? It was underneath it. It took millions and millions of dollars for one thing, and it took probably about 4 years to get that thing just to the point where you got it approved, and then you got it constructed. So they're just they're an interesting animal to deal with. If you get them on a good day and something that you want to do is of interest to them, they're a great partner. But if it has an operational impact on them, they're always the, hey, we were here first. And that's a very difficult battle to be up against. So very difficult.
Go ahead, Aaron.
If there's no further input from the city council, then that concludes this presentation.
Well, I guess, go ahead.
So in terms of policy decisions, in terms of new programs you want to implement or programs that you want to change, those all have some kind of budget impact. And we're really looking for that type of input from the council, whether it's tonight or it's at our next formal budget meeting. Please be thinking about that. If you have any thoughts tonight, it's not a done deal, but we'd like to know what you're thinking so that we can start thinking as staff, okay, what is it going to mean in terms of a budget? How can we support it? How can we try to move that agenda forward if the council's interested in doing that? So it's that kind of input that we really, really need to have, and the sooner we have that input as staff, the better prepared we are to help make that happen in next year's budget.
Well, I've been thinking a lot, and I've been contemplating a lot, and I don't think it's time for me to say it right now, but it'll come in the near future.
Okay.
Mine. So if anybody else in the members of the city council want to say anything in reference to that policies or whatever, This is the time, or we can wait till the next meeting?
Well, just to keep in mind, I'm still hoping we can get a little more recreational activities out there for the general public. Maybe some parks, maybe the ones that you have with IGAs, with schools, maybe we can work on that and try to open them up.
You're thinking off of the Bafford, that particular park, that soccer
The
field
one
at
at
the
the
school?
one at the school that we've been talking about for 2 years?
Yeah, yeah, okay.
We have an IGA with the schools, don't we?
We do a shared facility type,
Right.
yeah, we do.
But that one is gonna be different, because if we have to invest money in it, then, it's either gonna be ours or who's it gonna be, so. I've talked to Mr. Zimmerman about that, and I've talked to, Bombi and several people, and we discussed this 2 years ago, Mr. Jones.
We have, yeah.
Because we were interested in using the soccer field, and behind the school in, on Bedford. And, they still haven't come up and said, you know what, yeah, go ahead, take it. Because if the city would have to invest all the money in preparing and the irrigation and everything, and there is no parking. There's no off-street parking, there's no parking at all.
To address that parking,
Yeah,
in the event that the city council did direct staff to do this, we've already started thinking about how we could use, you know, that shoulder, that dirt shoulder on the other side of the soccer field and the road, how we could convert that into some kind of public parking. We don't have any specific plans on that, but we've been thinking about that and know that it's a potential down the road.
But it's something that we should. And then we have the retention pond, of course, that was a park at one time on Sonora, at the end of Sonora, but that is a $12 million project.
Okay.
Not going.
I appreciate the input, and, you know, we'll obviously be thinking about that.
Mr. Mayor, if I.
Go ahead.
I apologize.
Go ahead.
I did want to just touch briefly on the budget agenda or upcoming schedule. So the next plan is to have a work session prior to the next city council meeting in April. Staff's goal is to get a preliminary budget into your hands so that we can begin working through that.
Right. And that, we're gonna be in a study session type of format, or is it gonna be a meeting?
Obviously, I mean, that would be up to you all, however.
Mr. Mayor, I had contemplated, kind of like we've done it in the past, a study session where we put tables out here, we'd be able to get, you know, a little more of a friendly discussion type environment, and we would hammer out, you know, those types of input.
Yeah, great, I think that'd be the best. Thank you, Mr. Judge. Thank you, Aaron. Item number 7, consent agenda, approval of minutes, February 12, 2014, 4 p.m. Minutes of February 12, 2014, 6 p.m. And item number 8, liquor license.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you very much. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Orders. A, consideration and possible action on order 2014-03-011.
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Thank you very much. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? The ayes have it. B, consideration of and possible action of order 2014-03-012.
So move, Mr. Mayor.
Second.
Thank you very much. Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? The ayes have it. Item number C, consideration and possible action of order 2014-03-013.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? The ayes have it. D, consideration and possible action of order 2014-03-014.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, the ayes have it. Resolutions. A, consideration and possible action of resolution R 2014-03-1003-002. A resolution, okay, go ahead. Well, I just want to read out, it's a resolution of the City Council to adopt the Start by Believing campaign, which is a public awareness campaign not uniquely that uniquely focuses on the public response to sexual assault. And I had a long talk with the police chief, and I think it's something that is beneficial for our community, and we'll probably be one of the first communities doing it in the state, chief. Yes. All in favor of discussion? Do we have a motion on this? Yes, second. All right. All in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Number 10, city manager report. Mr. Dilly?
Mr. Mayor, today is my 20th wedding anniversary, and so I'll be very brief.
I thought you wanted a raise or something.
No.
Or food or,
Okay, this meeting is adjourned, not.
I just, you know, those of you who are planning on going to the League of, the National League Conference, I hope it's a productive meeting. I know, what do you guys leave, Saturday, Sunday, Monday? Saturday? Well, good luck with that. I hear it's a great conference.
Mr. Hanesian, the vice mayor, is the host.
Oh, awesome.
So
Awesome. Thank you, Vice
you
Mayor.
need to go through him for the actual event and stuff.
I look forward to hearing all about it.
Entertainment.
His itinerary.
We are on the final cusp of completing the fiscal year audit for 13. So that's working out just fine, and once we have that information, obviously you'll get your own individual copies of that, and there'll be a presentation on those findings. Other than that, I don't have anything else.
Thank you. Future agenda items, members of the city council? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.